Hey folks, Jim Wallace here, Executive Director of Gun Owners Action League. I'm with
Mike Harris, Director of Public Policy for Gun Owners Action League.
And we are officially here at the Hornady Studio at Goal Headquarters. Hornady is actually now the sponsor of our studio. They have been so great to us, especially in this fight in the last year and a half, and we're happy to have them on board.
So they make great stuff.
They make great stuff, and they've, I mean, everything from ammo to safes, you got it. So
can't go wrong.
No, not at all. So, all right, folks. So what's going on is the Executive Office of Public Safety just released their draft regulations for registration and serialization. We've only had these less than 24 hours, and these are draft regs. If you go to the Goal website, right at the top in the link tree, I guess you call it, you'll see a link. You can go right to it. You can download the regs, and you can read the public hearing announcement, which is, May 28th, I think it is?
Yeah, May 28th.
May 28th. So
it's all virtual.
Yeah.
It's not going to be an in-person one. It's a virtual hearing.
Yeah, well, it's virtually something, but we probably shouldn't say that on this one. But So anyway, we're going to try to just briefly go over what we have seen in the
draft
regs.
Yeah.
Well, our first impressions we probably shouldn't talk about on air, but we will give you our second impressions after we started to actually talk about it.
We've relaxed a little bit.
We've relaxed a little bit. So we've got a lot of stuff highlighted, and again, we're going to get out something, in writing. We'll have it on the website probably sometime next week to give people some guidance. But there is some very confusing stuff in these regs. Again, just a draft, but I guess the confusion. Since they're regulations about Chapter 135, it makes sense that they're confusing.
It's confusion.
So, but yeah, go ahead, Mike.
Yeah,
run away.
So as you might know, regulations are kind of the rules that are promulgated by the executive departments that are in charge of executing the law that kind of clarify and really set up the parameters by which statutes are enforced. So in Massachusetts, they're called CMRs, and these correspond with sections of Chapter 135, like the serialization corresponds with. Let me see, what was it? What did we say? It was Section 35. Section 35 of Chapter 135, and what this does is it just kind of describes the scope and purpose of the registration and serialization sections of Chapter 135. Mm-hmm. So, EOPSS, which is the Executive Office of Public Safety and Security, we're in charge of getting these regulations together, and they're kind of on time, believe it or not.
Well,
the parameters.
We'll see, because this is, again, they're just getting started now. Something you should know, even though there's a public hearing, there's no vote on this. The legislature has no vote in this. We have no vote in this. And that historically in the United States has been a scary thing about regulation nationwide, because these agencies, as we've seen through the ATF and others, they can just promulgate regs. I mean, technically they have to listen to you, but remember the listening tour that Mike Day did? So, that's pretty much how they listen to you.
Yeah.
Now, they will take technical amendments sometimes, but you just have to keep that in mind when you're dealing with the regulatory side of things. It's totally different.
Completely different. It's not really it's not a vote, like Jim just said. It's not a voting exercise. It's hey, these are the regulations that we're proposing. What kind of mistakes have we made? Is there anything we can do to make them easier to follow? But these are what they're going to look like, and this is what the statute prescribes they should look like. So. I don't know, Jim, you want to get into it? We can talk about some of the definitions. Yeah,
I mean, just some of the things that we're looking at. Now, again, this is the one on registration. There's a separate one on serialization. And right away, they're talking about all firearm transactions within the Commonwealth, including but not limited to all purchases, sales, rentals, leases, loans, or other transfers. So basically, any of those things have to be registered in the Commonwealth. But, what I want to see, Mike, is how many loaners they actually get registered, because technically under the new law and under this regulation, if you loan somebody a gun for more than 7 days, you actually have to report
Is
that.
it more than 7 days, or is it 7 days or more? I think it might be 7 days or more. I think you can only loan something to somebody for 6 days, believe it or not.
Less than 7.
Less than 7.
Less than 7. Okay.
So it's even worse.
So on day 6, you're okay. On day 7, you're a felon,
Yeah, you're a
apparently,
felon.
I guess. You know?
Yep.
So same gun, same bat channel. It's just, yeah. So pretty serious. There's also another little thing in there at the beginning under purpose and scope. And I think it's just funny when they put this in there that nothing in this set of regulations shall be interpreted to limit the authority granted to the Executive Office of Public Safety.
Yeah.
Well, there's a statement for you right there, right?
Whatever that means.
Yeah.
DCJIS or its commissioner too.
Yeah.
So,
So,
you know,
but then we get into some of the definitions and other definitions of assemble. I think it's just bad writing, bad printing, whatever you want to call it, because it talks about the repair of the fitting of special barrel stocks, trigger mechanisms
to firearms.
To firearms. So I think it's supposed to be repair or the fitting of barrel stocks, trigger. Now that's kind of interesting because it doesn't include things like sights, grips,
Right.
things like that. So
Just the operational portions.
Yeah, just the operational portions. One term I don't like, which is also in the law itself, is the term manufacture.
Right.
And Mike and I had a lot of conversation about that again today.
That is a specific meaning.
Very specific in federal law. So they have to be very careful about how they're applying that definition in these regs and how they're going to apply it to the law. So it's kind of concerning when you start to see that.
Right.
Because then you go down to the definition of privately made firearm. And it says a firearm manufactured or assembled. Well, Mike and I don't manufacture firearms. You know, we may build a couple here and there, but we don't manufacture them. And again, that's a terminology they're going to have to be very careful with, and so will we for that matter. Because if they're keeping track of guns somehow in a database, that the database is, Mike manufactured it, that could catch the attention of the ATF at some point.
It certainly could.
And they're going to suddenly show up and meet Benny and whoever else answers the door.
They might have a very different definition of what manufacture means in the state.
Yeah. So
that has implications on 3D printers and CNC machines and things like that we were talking about too.
Huge. And then under the time of registration, they call it, it actually says registration of firearms shall be completed at the time of import, purchase, acquisition, manufacture, or assembly. Mike had some great comments on the import part.
Well, I don't really understand. So if you purchase a shotgun in Maine and you drive down into Massachusetts, when do you have to report that? Is it the moment you cross the state lines? We're gonna have a whole bunch of people pulling over on 93
trying to get on the Merck system on their phone. Yeah.
At the time of, it's just clarifying the language is always important, and that's what these regulations are supposed to do.
Right.
So a lot of the regs just kind of paraphrase the law in most cases, but really the purpose of regulations is to clarify what the statute says. So if it just says exactly the same thing as the statute, then we're kind of nowhere.
Then in that same section of the reporting, of the registration, there's a couple sections that talks about new residents. It talks about licensed retailers. It talks about things that have been acquired. But I think they made a mistake, and they're probably going to change this because it says may be registered in all of those instances. I'm pretty sure they're not giving us a choice.
Because in the first one it says registration of firearms shall be completed at the time of blah blah blah.
Right.
And in 2, 3, 4, and 5, it says a new firearms imported by a new resident may be registered within 60 days. It doesn't really make a lot of sense.
Right.
I know this is a first draft, but it's the first draft that they put out to the public.
Yeah.
So, when you see things like this and you're it's a little bit confusing when you say, hey, this is what you're putting out to the public. Do you guys even really pay attention to what you're doing? But, you know.
And then in section 6, which is the reporting of firearm transactions, you basically have 7 days to report the transaction to MERS.
Right.
Now, this is really confusing because just 2 seconds ago,
Right.
we talked about it had to be serialized and registered at the moment you acquired
The
it.
time of...
So I guess what they're saying is that we have to register it 7 days before we report the transfer?
Yeah, I mean, I don't... so, I mean, from what it looks like, it sounds like transaction reporting and registration are two different things now.
Yeah.
Even though on the portal it's always said registration for some stupid reason.
Makes absolutely no sense. But let's see, what else do we have here under registration of firearms? Has to complete registration process. Users must agree to the MERS firearms licensing portal terms and conditions.
Right.
We see that every time we go into somebody else's
What do they
website.
say?
You know, but who reads it and what am I agreeing to?
Yeah.
Because this isn't like I'm going on Amazon and buying a product and I agree to their terms and conditions. These are state agencies that don't like us very much.
Yeah,
And I'm a little bit concerned about what I might be agreeing to. So we're going to have to look into what that might be.
Yeah, I don't think it would be a dumb thing for us to have one of our attorneys take a look at, do a deep dive into those. I mean, even to pay someone to do it for real.
Oh, Lord. So moving on through the proposed regulations under exemptions, and this has always been a pet peeve of mine. Firearms being delivered to law enforcement for the sole purpose of the destruction of the firearm. Yeah. So that doesn't have to be reported. It always aggravates me. Why does the state not care about end of game, right? Or end of trail, however you want to call it. Because now, according to the system, the gun still exists. Because law enforcement hasn't reported it as being destroyed, then what? So it's just kind of hanging in there in the nothing sphere,
right,
and just exists. So that's potentially problematic.
And just confusing language in 10 subclause 2.
Yeah, you got to read this.
Firearms possessed by common carriers and their duly authorized employees and agents while performing the regular and ordinary transport of firearms as merchandise for customers licensed to permit such transport. I mean, I guess that just means the final receiver of the firearm has to be licensed, but it's just a weird way to say it. It's just, all this stuff just seems designed to confuse all the time.
Yeah.
It sucks.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, that's one of those instances where the judge asks you, did you read the regs? Did you?
Yeah, I did. But I don't know if I understood it.
Just because I read it doesn't mean I know what it does. So
yeah, I mean, it's just a confusingly written sentence, and it just, a lot of times it just feels like this stuff's on.
So the rest of it is just, violations.
All right. So now we're getting into serialization.
Serialization. So this is the other proposed regs. It's a separate document. Both of them are downloadable on the GOAL website. So you can go up there and click download and
read it for yourself.
Read it. Keep a highlighter and a red pen and a bourbon or a beer next to you or something. But because it's scarily entertaining, I guess is a good term.
Also, another thing to say: if you think we're all wet on some of this stuff, or if you have a different opinion, shoot us an email. We love our members to reach out. And
the more eyes, the better.
Stuff. Yeah,
the more eyes, the better.
Especially with this most recent changes to everything. The more eyes, the better, and we appreciate when members reach out and are polite about their disagreements with us.
Polite being
nice.
the key term.
Yes.
Yes. And don't kill the messengers. We're only delivering this to you.
We're trying.
So anyway, this is the serialization piece. Again, the term manufacturer appears, and there's a definition for that. We need to be really careful about what that means, as we said before. Right. The other piece, which is in the law as well, and we've taken exception for that, is that it has to be, the serial number has to be permanently embedded, and they call it applied in such a way that cannot be easily or readily removed without destroying the part to which it is applied. As a formerly trained machinist, I'm going to tell you, that is physically impossible to do.
It's not that easy.
Because how can you apply something that you then can never get to again? Now, I'm sure there's a physicist somewhere that's going to tell me how that can happen, but I would doubt most people that are manufacturing, assembling, etching a serial number. No, it doesn't happen. So they're going to have to try to figure out how to make that work. And now, just remember, they still haven't figured out how to make Chapter 180 work from 1998. So this is going to take an awful long time. The next one, I got to have Mike explain it to you, because when I read it again, just being the average Joe, I said, this makes absolutely no sense. And it's the definition of what a valid serial number is, but it's much more than that. So, Mike, why don't you see if you can
so the definition of a
this.
valid serial number in these regs is actually the same definition that's in Chapter 135. So I was wrong earlier. I said it was Section 35, but it's actually Section 32, subsection 2F. And so what it says is an identifying number that has been, 1, placed on a firearm by a federal licensee authorized to serialize firearms or pursuant to the laws of any state, or 26 U.S.C. 5842 and the regulations promulgated thereunder, or 2, a serial number issued by the Director of Bureau of Alcohol, Tobacco, and Firearms and Explosives in the United States Department of Justice or the DCJIS. So on its face, it looks like this doesn't include serial numbers that are issued by the Merck system, when in actuality, what this is saying, what it seems to be saying, is that a serial number is not valid on your gun unless it is placed there by a licensee. Does that mean an FFL? Does that mean a manufacturer? We're not 100% sure, but that it mirrors the language in Chapter 135. So we're it's kind of funky.
And it even further confuses it, because DCGIS, CGIS, basically, it's confusing the way it's written. And it's not clear to me if I have to take this to a person who's licensed to actually put the serial number on the gun.
But even though it's not clear from that, and it's not clear under Chapter 135, there is another subclause under Section 32 that says the Executive Office of Public Safety and Security, in consultation with the Department of Criminal Justice Information Services, shall promulgate rules and regulations for the implementation of this section, including the technical requirements for the serialization of firearms, procedures for requesting serial numbers, and procedures for public notice and an outreach campaign to promote awareness, such and such. So the fact that the statute includes a provision that says that EOPSS are the ones who set up how this is done means that that might be what it means. But it's something that we're going to have to seek clarification about at the public hearing, I think.
Right, and the fact that they include serial number, issued by basically ATF, and they say, or DCJIS, which is the state agency, but they don't spell that out for people. And so people are going to read that and think it's totally federal, has nothing to do with state government. So it's just more complications. Let's see. So basically a request for a serial number actually has to be done prior to building a gun or assembling a gun. And assembly they're pretty clear in here. Does not include if you have to take something apart, clean it, fix it, whatever. Doesn't include that anymore. It used to. Some of the original drafts of 4420, that was in there. But so basically this is, before you even decide you're going to build this thing, you have to apply for a serial number. So the other weird thing is that
how backed up is this going to be?
Well, and the requirements that they want from you includes your Social Security number, your driver's license, which, no, you don't need my Social Security number. All you need is my firearms license, my LTC, my FID, well, whatever that might mean. But and then in the dealer, firearms retailer, if they're going to apply a serial number, there's there's a list of requirements they have. And by the way, one of them is not Social Security number. Imagine that. And is not our driver's license.
Or tax number.
Right. But the other thing, too, is it says whether the request is for a privately made firearm. So this kind of also builds on Mike's thought that they're the ones that have to actually put a serial number on the gun.
Which again is not clear, because there's another provision here that says requester. The definition of a requester is an individual, entity, or manufacturer requesting a unique serial number. I mean, we could be wrong. You could be able to etch it on yourself, but at the same time, it's another thing we're going to need clarification on.
I love that terminology, requestor. It
Yeah.
sounds like a B-rated movie somewhere.
I know.
I don't know.
But
it's really strange.
But if you look at O under the information that they're going to be seeking for requesting a serial number, one of the pieces of information is if the request is for a privately made firearm, the means and manner of production, which to me implies 3D printers, kits, CNC machines, hand molded out of clay, whatever you want to call it. So
Dremel tool.
Yeah, which has implications on other provisions of Chapter 135 dealing with 3D printers. So that'll be another one we'll have to kind of ask about.
So issuance of serial numbers, and this is very important. Basically, they're saying that you have to go through the portal, which we kind of expected, to request your serial number with all the information they're going to ask for. But they will not mail you the serial number. They won't even email it to you. They're going to email you a notification that says you have to log in and get it. But here is a critical piece of that. It says the requestor responsibility to print and save the document containing the serial number for their records.
Right.
So
for how long?
Well, now we have to keep records.
For how long do you need to keep the records? Did the record pass with the gun? Do you hang on to it as the original requester? If you sell the gun, or if it passes to somebody else, does that, change the status of anything? It's,
right.
So I know these kind of mundane questions, but
important, very important questions, because if we don't have answers, you put yourself at risk. But so here's another key one, and Mike said, well, this is Jim's favorite because of the registration system that they're building. Issuance of a serial number by DCJIS does not constitute or determine the legality of any firearm under state or federal law. So they're going to allow you to apply for a serial number
for an AR-15 or AK
for anything that may not be even legal to possess.
And they'll issue you one, it sounds like.
Right.
It says, don't even apply for it. It says issuance of a serial number.
Yeah.
It says, hey, if we give you a serial number for your gun that's supposed to be banned in Massachusetts, it's not our fault.
That's right. And that goes right along with the registration scheme that they're developing. And, I sit on the Firearm Control Advisory Board, FCAB we call it, and I have said since this thing started, listen, if you're going to require registration, then the system needs to be set up to such an extent that you cannot register a gun you can't lawfully possess in Mass. And all I've been told is, well, that would be impossible with all the makes and models. Hey, I don't care. You guys made this law. You deal with it. Because essentially, two pieces here. If you're allowing me to get a serial number for an unlawful gun, and you're allowing me to register the unlawful gun, that's virtually entrapment. Mike's the law school graduate, not me, but it looks like it to me.
It's definitely silliness and an abdication of the responsibility that they're giving themselves.
There you go. That's a Suffolk law term, silliness, right there.
That's buffoonery.
Also, time of serialization. So when does things have to happen?
Yeah.
Everything must be serialized
after
by
1968. No.
After 1968, must be serialized. All firearms must be serialized by October 2nd, 2026. Now, supposedly, the system will be in place by then, but it does not say that's part of the deal. So, according to these regs, if the system's not even in place, you're still in violation. And Mike has had discussions with me and others There's actually case law around the country, right, about systems.
Impossibility.
Yeah. So, you know.
Just because a law is impossible to follow doesn't mean you're not supposed to follow it.
Right. It's just,
yeah.
I love government. So there's other things in there too that, you know, about timelines. For instance, if you inherit something, you have 60 days to make it happen, to serialize it. Again, post 1968, and no antiques. You don't have to serialize your antiques as defined in the law. So again, the same thing, the serial number has to be placed in a manner that is not susceptible to being readily obliterated, altered, or removed. Again, physically impossible. The other piece is that, and I would apply this mostly to stun guns and tasers, because those are typically made of plastic. And if it's not a metal surface, you actually have to attach a metal plate to whatever it is, and then have the serial number put in there. I told Mike earlier, I don't think I'm going to screw a metal plate to a stun gun. I don't know about you, but there's a little bit of electricity in there.
They're traditionally made out of insulating material.
Yeah, so I'm going to say no on that one.
I mean, it sounds silly, but, it also just kind of screams about how ridiculous it is that they count stun guns and tasers as firearms, like, to begin with. I mean, it's just another way for us to point out how stupid that is.
So here's another piece of the serialization one: a modification during manufacture or assembly.
Yeah.
So here it is. If the requestor wishes to make changes to the configuration of the firearm while manufacturing or assembling the firearm, the applicant may do so as long as all changes are reported to the state through the MERC system.
Right.
Notice I said state instead of the 5 letters I can't say for some reason. CGIS, sure. So does that mean even after?
Well, I mean, we don't. It doesn't know. It says during. It says
while
manufacturing or assembling the firearm. So that's two. Those are two very different words that have two very different meanings. So I mean, this could be like, your P365 or P320 or Echelon FCUs that drop in and out of different frames. So if you buy a, I know it's not the same as a homemade firearm because they come as a serialized piece, but at the same time, I mean, when you go to assemble your P320 or your P365 and you report like, a 3.4-inch barrel or a 4.4-inch barrel, if you change the barrel out and you make it into something different, does that require you to report that as well every time you want to change it? I mean, it's just it's
all good questions.
It's a lot of extra responsibility and extra,
It also makes the transfer of serial numbers to a firearm other than the one identified in the request expressly prohibited. Not just prohibited, but expressly prohibited.
Yes.
So we want to make sure we get that word in there. And again, it talks about the things delivered to law enforcement for destruction. It talks about transport by common carriers, exempting them, I guess, is what it's saying. The one that's a little bit strange, Mike and I kind of worked through it. Firearms produced by federally licensed manufacturers, not for sale in the Commonwealth. And Mike was the one, kind of includes anything that's unfinished or whatever.
So since frames or receivers are now considered firearms under Chapter 135, if you have, if Polymer 80 was in Ipswich and they decided that they were going to start selling, and they were selling guns to FFLs outside of the Commonwealth, they wouldn't have to serialize those frames or receivers that were leaving.
Yep.
And everything in accordance to the Gun Control Act of 1968 anyways. So
then there's another piece about firearms with existing serial numbers, and then you have to actually do a little bit more research to figure out if you're complying with that, which it should be pretty straightforward, but again, it's really not. because you have to look at the serial numbers and registration requirements for that. So, so pretty much that's just our initial run through.
Review. We could be wrong about some of this stuff. We probably are, but you know.
Hey, nobody's perfect but me, right? Just don't tell my wife that. But
it's just, you know, when we get this stuff out, we got to make sure we can put something out there for everybody. And
so we'll get it.
Guideline.
We'll get into a little bit more detail probably the beginning of next week, and when we do, we'll get it out, and then we'll certainly get out the notice even more as the hearing comes up.
Right.
I'm going to talk. I actually, as we're recording this, I have an FCAB meeting tomorrow, and I am going to request that they actually get out into the public and talk to people about this stuff. Don't sit behind the computer.
Right.
Get out there and deal with the 650,000 gun owners that you're about to screw over and talk to them one-on-one.
Yeah. I mean, even though none of this stuff was unexpected, it's still, you know, Chapter 135 was a shock to all of us. And I don't think the legislature and the executive really grasp how drastic of a change this is and how much it's going to affect everybody. So, you know, giving people the time and the ability to kind of digest this stuff before going out into the world and potentially becoming a felon.
Felons in waiting. We're all felons in waiting. So I do want to reiterate, and people I know get frustrated about this, we cannot give you legal advice.
Right.
All we can do is tell you what things say. We can try to interpret it a little bit for you, but we absolutely cannot give you solid legal advice about what you can and can't do, what you should and shouldn't do. Some of this is actually written that way on purpose, because I call it a gotcha bill. If they want you, they got you. You just can't. And what's the terminology the local attorneys use now? What's your risk tolerance?
What's your risk tolerance?
Yeah. So you're going to have to determine that in everything you do.
Do you want to be the test case? Do you want to have your name as the plaintiff or defendant in one of these cases? That's kind of that's where we're at for some of this stuff.
So anyway, folks, thanks for watching. Thanks for listening. And we'll get back to you on this stuff as soon as we have more. Thanks.
Thanks.